Okay, so the next session will be presented by Eva van Heukelom. I need to have it in writing. And Eva will be explaining, it's the GSSI, so she will be providing a common language and visibility for seafood sustainability and traceability, which is what is going to explain about the whole bigger picture of how GSSI is working in the seafood sector. So, Eva, please. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good morning. It's really great to be here today. GSSI and MarinTrust have known each other for a long time, I think, in the seafood industry, but it's actually the first time that we're presenting something together, so it's a really exciting moment for us. So looking around the room, I assume most of you actually don't know me, so I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Eva van Heukelom. Don't worry about not pronouncing that correctly. And I'm the partnership manager at GSSI. So GSSI is based in the Netherlands, but we are actually a global initiative. And today I'll be presenting a little bit more about our work and how that work can actually help to create more visibility and more understanding for the different initiatives that are working more at the fishery or the farm level, and how they're all ultimately making their contribution towards a more sustainable and traceable sector. So if I have to summarize GSSI, this is always the summary that we use. So GSSI is a public-private partnership working to accelerate seafood sustainability efforts by creating and utilizing benchmark solutions, providing confidence, clarity, and choice. So a few elements there I wanted to highlight. First is that GSSI is a public-private partnership, which I'll get into a little bit more detail. But it's important to understand that it's actually our partners that are setting our agenda. Second is that we are purely seafood and sustainability focused. So that's really our core business, and everything we do is focused on making the seafood sector more sustainable and more fair. And third, the words confidence, clarity, and choice. And I'd like you to really try and remember those three words, as they'll be highlighted in different aspects throughout the presentation. But important to understand already is that GSSI is not an initiative that has their own certification programs or improvement projects, etc. But instead, we're really working between the industry, markets, and existing sustainability initiatives, really creating that confidence, clarity, and choice. So first, with a little bit more detail on that public-private partnership. So really important to highlight here is the UN FAO, one of our core partners since we started our work in 2013 already. And working together with FAO as well as a few other public actors, but combining that with a large network in the seafood industry. So supply chain companies, so working across the supply chain, as well as working across the globe. And as you'll see here, we work with both the industry as well as with the markets. And if we talk about buyers, I think we're most commonly known for working with a lot of global retailers, but we also work with other buyers like food service companies or hospitality chains, but also increasingly with those that are actually looking to buy marine ingredients. So have been working with feed companies for a while, but now see more and more interest from pet food companies, for instance, or supplement companies that are all really feeling some pressure to make sure that they have responsible sourcing commitments in place. So really working between the market and the industry as well as with the sustainability initiatives, I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and look at these different sustainability initiatives that are out there. I expect most of you will know most of these kind of solutions that we have found in the past decades towards making sure that we have a more sustainable or a more traceable product. So certification programs are really important examples, but also aquaculture fishery improvement projects, projects run by NGOs or development agencies, as well as sometimes a reliance on regional management systems or national legislation. And this is just a few examples that we come across very regularly. Looking at those first two in a little bit more detail, as we all know, there's not just one or two certification programs, but there's actually quite a range of certification programs as well as improvement projects. But they have, of course, all their a different scope. They're not all focusing on the same things, and they also don't have the same level of credibility. So, you know, it can get a little bit confusing with all of these initiatives all falling under certification programs, but in theory, they don't actually mean the same things. You know, with fishery and aquaculture improvement projects, we might see a slightly clearer picture there, but still, it's very unclear what the credibility is of these initiatives and what the scope is exactly, what they're trying to tackle. Because sustainability is, of course, quite a broad term. Are we talking about social? Are we talking about environmental, economic? Quite a lot of things to consider. So, going back to this overview, you know, with looking at actually the others, a lot of the projects, there it's going to be even harder to have one complete overview of everything that is out there. We don't necessarily at GSSI think this is a bad thing. We see that this is cause for confusion sometimes, but we do want to make sure that we acknowledge that there is a need for diversity in solutions. Because, you know, while a lot of challenges in sustainability are very similar, looking at how to address these will depend on the size, the species that you're working with, the location that you're in, culture, just to name a few, you know, important elements there. But, you know, if we look a bit further down the supply chain with some of the market players that we work with, it gets very confusing for them sometimes how these initiatives taken at the fishery or the farm level is actually helping them to meet their sustainability commitments or the traceability commitments, because, you know, they really feel that heat from consumers to understand, hey, can I still safely consume seafood as part of a sustainable diet? So we really need to understand, have more of that clarity, but at the same time making sure we do have choice and do that in a way that it doesn't lead to a lot of duplication where we're doing the same thing over and over again, but rather that we have more of a common understanding of what all these different initiatives mean. So this is why at GSSI we work in the following way. So for us, the first step is always connecting the stakeholders in the seafood industry. So as I mentioned, our agenda is really set by the seafood industry, bringing them together, really understanding, okay, what is it that markets want and what is it they want to show to their consumers, but at the same time making sure that we do acknowledge some of the challenges that may exist on the processing, the production level. So, you know, I spoke a little bit about, you know, the confusion of, you know, from those at the end of the supply chain. What does it actually mean, everything that's being done by my suppliers? And this is really where we see those trusted reference frameworks come in. So these are frameworks that we at GSSI have created to create a better understanding of, you know, looking at all of these different initiatives that are taken, how does that actually compare to international legislation? Because, you know, what a sustainable or a traceable sector looks like, it is already pretty well defined. FEO has a lot of guidelines on sustainable aquaculture and fisheries. ILO has guidelines on fair labor practices. GDST just mentioned, you know, all the key data elements that they have set for what it means to really have a traceable product. So all of this work's already done. We really don't need to reinvent the wheel. But we do need to make sure that we have tools, tangible tools that actually allow us to compare all of those solutions, small scale, large scale, global, regional, to that same framework. And in that way, really have more of a common language, if you will, on seafood sustainability. Taking all of that and looking at that third step, empowering sustainability leadership in a local and global context. So there we're taking it back to, again, maybe more the individual level. So stepping away from the partnership, but using everything that we've done in the partnership and having that for the full sector to use in their own company practices, but in that way, be able to choose whichever fits their practices best, working towards sustainability, understanding what they're currently doing on the basis of those international guidelines, but also understanding what is next. I think we're constantly trying to push the performance, the sustainability performance of this sector. So for this, you know, the frameworks will also be able to provide that reference. So not only, hey, how well am I doing, but also, what can I do to become even better? So these are the frameworks that we have developed so far. And I will go and explain these in a little bit more detail. But before, I wanted to show them all on one slide to really show some commonalities here. So first, you'll see they all have a clear audience. So we have the global benchmark tool and the SSCI benchmark, and the audience is certification programs, because that's really what the partners that we work with, what the industry had said, that's where we really would like to have the clarity how the existing programs compare to international guidelines, because certification programs are really important for a lot of procurement policies globally. Second, you'll see that they have that basis in international guidelines. So with the certification programs with a sustainability, like an environmental sustainability standard, of course we look at the ILO Code of Conduct and eco-labeling guidelines. But for the SSCI, looking more at social, we look at the ILO guidelines. Third tool that we have, you see a slightly different audience. You see there actually the audience is suppliers of seafood, really coming from a need to, you know, what's being done both to work towards certification, so for those suppliers that don't have certification yet, or what is actually done on top of certification. So for this, we see that we have a slightly different audience, and because of that, we also have a slightly broader scope of the tool, and we include not only FAO, but also those ILO in one tool. So first, I will explain a little bit more about the Global Benchmark Tool. So the Global Benchmark Tool is essentially a framework based on the FAO eco-labeling guidelines, and on the basis of that, we recognize credible certification programs that have proven and demonstrated on an annual basis that they are operating in alignment with that framework. So currently we have what we call 9 GSSI recognized programs. So you'll see it's a mix of regional programs as well as global programs, some with an aquaculture standard and some with a fishery standard. So we look at their governance system, we look at their chain of custody standard, the way they work with ABs and CBs, but we also look at their standards. So for instance, for these programs that have an aquaculture standard, there will be a few criteria on feed, making sure that they use a sustainable supply of feed. So this is, for instance, that for a long time we've already seen the programs that we've recognized reference the MarinTrust standard, for instance, under that element, really to demonstrate their alignment. So we don't only work to actually recognize with these programs. It is great to have this group of programs and know, hey, they are in alignment with the FAO guidelines, but why do we actually do that? So this is an example of a major retailer, Walmart, and the work we've done with them to include a reference to the GSSI recognized programs. So before, they mentioned 2 programs specifically, one for fisheries and one for aquaculture. But after we launched the benchmark tool and worked with them, they've actually added there just a few words, but with quite a big impact, namely meaning that from now on, they would accept products certified under any of the GSSI recognized programs. So with that, you know, really acknowledging that all of these programs are credible, and not forcing suppliers to, you know, maybe for them they would need a BAP, for instance, in this instance, but, you know, a supplier doesn't have one customer and another customer might want only ASC, for instance. So we say those programs are both really credible, and with that, making sure that we prevent duplication and that we really have more of a level playing field and acknowledgement of credible programs, and at the same time also distinguishing those credible programs from programs that are not so credible and that are actually maybe claiming that, but they don't have the proper assurances in place. So this is something we've repeated with a number of buyers. So here you'll see mainly some large retailers. You'll see US-based, also Europe, Japan, Australia, Southern Africa. And this is a continuous part of our work, really, having this common understanding of who are the credible certification programs. So on top of retailers, we also work with others in the sector that are working with retailers and that are important to create that common understanding of credible programs. So these are some examples now. So you'll see retail associations, NGOs, UN Global Compact. And this is where we would see MarinTrust be added to this group soon. I will not go into further detail here, as Francisco has prepared a great presentation to explain a little bit what this collaboration would look like. But I did want to show how there's actually those two different groups that are really relevant for us to ultimately achieve that goal and really achieve that impact. So the impact is that we now have that one clear reference to credible certification, and making sure that there's also room for regional programs, which, you know, we have seen there is sometimes that need for a regional program to really get all of the fisheries or the farms on board. But it was difficult to obtain recognition. So with this, that one clear reference, there is actually that opportunity. And with that, ultimately, with all retailers accepting any of the programs, hopefully working to really reduce some of the cost and avoid duplicative efforts. As we really see this as a big hurdle in achieving more sustainability if people get a fatigue, basically, because they feel they're doing the same thing over and over again. And finally, for those programs that aren't recognized, making sure that they have a clear understanding what do I actually need to do to improve. So I've mentioned here the global benchmark tool. You will see that I've also included the logo of SSCI here, because SSCI tool is a tool that basically does the exact same, only for social certification programs. We've launched this benchmark tool a lot more recently, just a few years ago. So we're still waiting for those first recognitions to come in, but really that way of, you know, that dynamics, the impact that it's working towards, very similar to the global benchmark tool, only talking about social compliance. So I will move forward to our third and final benchmarking solutions, which is the seafood map. It's important to understand first that seafood map is not, it's a platform rather than a benchmark tool that provides a recognition. So, you know, where we work a lot with procurement policies for the global benchmark tool for certification, seafood map is much more of an interactive platform that's really working to encourage continuous improvement and really provide a lot more visibility of all the different initiatives that a supplier is involved with. So we are launching this platform next year, so first half of 2023. So what you see here is just a demo really of what the platform could look like, but really to show, make a little bit more tangible what the objectives are that it's actually working towards. So you'll see on the right side here, you'll see 10 different principles. So these are those principles that are based on the FAO Code of Conduct, Eco-labeling Guidelines, ILO, and some SDGs. And it's a really comprehensive look on sustainability, where we're looking at environmental, social, economic. And under each one of these 10 principles, there'll be sub-principles linked. And what you see here on the platform is actually the current performance of this suppliers. This example is an aquaculture processor representing a group of farms in Indonesia, and you'll see, okay, this is actually their current performance. So if I am a buyer or an investor, I'd like to see how they're doing on animal welfare or water quality, I'd be able to see all of that in one clear look. Second, that's really important, is you'll see that these different icons on their current performance, they have a different color. and that relates to the level of credibility of the information that they've provided to the platform. So you'll see that this is, for instance, something where the work that GDST does or the work that's done on traceability ties in. So you see it's kind of a separate topic here, but in case there's traceability in place, the platform would show that immediately. Also, if you look at those icons, for instance, and some icons will cover feed, for instance. Let's say they work with MarinTrust certified feed, for instance, that will also be shown there. And then it would show that actually there's a high level of credibility of this information because there is a third-party verification in place. So it really allows to have, one page clearly see for each of the suppliers, hey, this is what they're doing currently, and this is the verifications they have in place. So that as a buyer or an investor, they would know, they would get a good understanding of how they're currently performing without having to really understand, oh, what does MarinTrust do? Oh, what does GDST do? What does ASC do? They can actually just see it on the basis of that common language in those 10 principles, and in that way make it a lot easier for them to really understand and start comparing suppliers. Another part of this platform is to encourage those continuous improvements on the basis of the international guidelines. So here you'll see another part of the platform where it shows, hey, this is, we could see in that previous page what your current performance is. So in the topic of water quality, for instance, we see those 4 icons. But there's actually new opportunities and new ways for you to improve, and in that way really push them constantly to become a more sustainable, a more traceable version of themselves. And in that, if let's say they're interested in understanding more about water monitoring, they could actually find, again, MarinTrust or GDST as those actors, those organizations that are active in the industry that can actually help them. Because there's so many of these initiatives, they do great work. Certification programs often have improvement projects, making sure that it becomes very clear for a producer or processor, how can I actually connect to them? And with that, what does that lead to? How does that lead to a better performance for me? And because that's combined with a platform which is visible, so the visibility for buyers and investors, there's actually for the first time an incentive for them to improve because they do get some recognition for that. And it's finally been made visible. So summarizing again the impact of this tool. So really having an inclusive platform, because we do allow for those different levels of verification, as long as there's full transparency on that, and with that making sure there's no greenwashing, regardless of what their scale is and their current performance. Second is to have more visibility of regional initiatives and this is something that we've also really tried to do with the global benchmark tool, making sure that there is actually room for regional initiatives, because we do believe there is, easy as it would be, unfortunately, there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to seafood sustainability. So we do need that variety in solutions. Making sure that the suppliers have an opportunity to connect with the different projects and do that in a very easy way without each and every one of them having to do full research, hey, who could possibly help me with improving here? And finally, as I mentioned, having that visibility, and with that, having more of an incentive for them instead of just closing the door because they're not there yet, making sure that we continuously provide incentives for them to actually improve and really start progressing towards becoming more sustainable. So before I pass the word on to Francisco, I wanted to bring this down. I know I gave you a lot of information. I hope it was interesting for you, but I want to kind of boil this down to why we actually do this type of work at GSSI. Of course, we've heard that from the other initiatives as well. We don't just do this to do it. It was actually the industry that set us up and said, hey, we need an organization that can really do this for the industry. But also, you know, for us, it's really important that we start to have a sector, a seafood sector in this case, that has a bit more of that visibility, and with that, that inclusivity, and that it's not always necessarily just, you know, a European solution and you all need to do this, but instead that we really start working towards more inclusivity and allow for those regional approaches. And, you know, having that variety, we see it can actually sometimes lead to maybe fragmentation because everyone starts doing their own thing. And that's why we find it so important to really have that common language and also have actually the collaboration between the different sustainability initiatives, because they all have their own, everyone has a part to play, and they can actually work really complementary towards each other. As long as we have a good understanding and a common language we can compare them to and really understand, okay, this is, you know, this is what everyone's doing, and that's how we're actually working towards a more sustainable and traceable sector. And make sure that we do that in a way that we're not wasting resources on duplication, but instead, you know, all keep that same common goal in mind, and all with our own focus and role. Thank you.